Recent economic news supports the argument that we should be putting more money in the pockets of wage earners and less money in the pockets of the super rich. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. The big news last week was that after the huge COVID-induced recession that literally shut down the American economy, economic growth under the leadership of President Biden and the Democrats has now surpassed pre-pandemic levels. While some economists argue it could have been higher, it's still a very impressive performance, one of the highest growth rates in our economy in history. Most of this growth was driven by an 11.8% increase in consumer spending. That's nearly unprecedented, and most economists are crediting the fact that the COVID relief bills put money in the pockets of average people, money that they're now spending to buy goods and services and power up the economy. This whole experience supports the argument that we should be putting money in the pockets of average families and not into the pockets of the very rich like Republicans want to do. For years, the argument of Republicans has been that if we give tax cuts to the very rich, they will increase their productivity and the benefits of their investment will trickle down to everybody else. Well, I hope that this economic recovery is the final nail in the coffin of that ridiculous argument. Economic benefits going primarily to the rich has only resulted in inequality, more houses for the very rich, and big inheritances for their children and grandchildren. It has certainly not spread prosperity widely. As always, by the way, I'll post links to all the relevant articles down below. We do have examples that we can specifically point to of where this supply-side trickle-down approach has failed. The most prominent example of that is in Kansas, where under the leadership of Republican Governor Sam Brownback, the state engaged in massive tax cuts under the promise that these tax cuts would power up the Kansas economy. What did it do instead? It led to a massive fiscal crisis in the state. Huge cuts to services and benefits, even to the point that moderate Republicans were voting for tax increases to undo this effort. Another example of the failure of trickle-down economics, of course, is the Trump tax giveaway to the rich. We heard promises that these tax cuts would pay for themselves and they'd power the economy up into greater growth. We heard that there'd be a massive increase in business investment as a result of these tax cuts. Of course, none of that came to pass. Instead, the budget deficit spiraled to unheard of levels, inequality increased, and business investment actually did not increase. In fact, the economic growth rate was exactly the same as it was before. So much for tax cuts powering our economy. Now, by now, I think the evidence points out that we should be distributing money to families, not to the very rich. And that's what benefits the economy in the long run. After all, unlike the very rich, who just put their money into tax havens to avoid paying any inheritance taxes, and spend their money on trips into space, rather than goods and services that would actually benefit Americans, when you give money to families, they spend their money on things like groceries and cars, and sometimes going to the restaurant. These are all things that boost up the local economies here in the United States. What's more is research has pretty conclusively found that increasing the minimum wage does not result in job losses. In fact, and again, I'll post the link down below, the University of California at Berkeley points out that raising the minimum wage actually benefits the economy because it gives people more money that they can spend locally. Now, it's pretty clear now that the only benefit tax cuts to the rich delivers is more money for the rich. Which sounds almost stupid, it's so obvious, but it's something that we've been deceiving ourselves about for the last 40 years. It's about time that we put this discredited philosophy to bed. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me or have any questions about this, please feel free to post down below. I'd sure appreciate a like of this video or a subscription to this channel. I'll see you in the next video, and in the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.